shattered dreams. The rain fell in sheets as Rachel Monroe sat motionless in her car, staring at the dilapidated building across the street. Her phone screen glowed with unread messages from her best friend, Tessa, each one a variation of, "Are you okay?" She wasn't okay. How could she be? 5 days ago, Marcus had stood in their apartment and announced he was taking the New York job alone. Without her. The promotion they'd spent 2 years planning for, the life they'd designed together, all of it crumbled in a single conversation. Rachel forced herself out of the car, her portfolio bag heavy on her shoulder. The building before her was a relic from another era, its brick facade stained with age and neglect. According to the email from her client, this had once been a thriving photography studio before the original owner passed away. Now the family wanted documentation before demolition. Perfect work for someone who felt like her own life was being torn down. The front entrance creaked open, revealing a vast open space filled with dust and shadows. Tall windows lined the eastern wall, though grime obscured most of the light. Rachel set down her bag and pulled out her camera, finding comfort in the familiar weight. Photography had been her first love before graphic design became her career. Before Marcus convinced her that commercial work was more practical than artistic pursuits. She was adjusting her lens settings when a voice startled her from behind. "Didn't expect anyone to be here this early." Rachel spun around to find a man emerging from a doorway she hadn't noticed. He was tall, with sandy brown hair tucked under a worn baseball cap, dressed in work clothes covered in sawdust. His hazel eyes held a mixture of surprise and warmth. "I'm Rachel. The family hired me to photograph the space before—" She trailed off, not wanting to say the word demolition. "Owen Bennett." He extended a calloused hand. "I'm doing salvage work, pulling out anything worth saving before the wreckers arrive. The original owner was my grandfather." Something in the way he said it made Rachel pause. There was grief there, recent and raw. She recognized it because she heard the same tone in her own voice these days. "I'm sorry for your loss." Owen nodded slowly, looking around the space. "He ran this studio for 40 years. Taught me everything about woodworking in that back room. Said every building has a soul, and it was our job to honor it." He smiled sadly. "Sounds foolish, probably." "It doesn't," Rachel said, meaning it. It sounds like he understood what most people miss. That spaces hold memories, that they shape who we become. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, two strangers united by loss. Then Owen cleared his throat. "There's something upstairs you should see. If you're photographing the place, you'll want to capture it." Rachel followed him up a narrow staircase, each step groaning under their weight. When they reached the second floor, her breath caught. The room was smaller than the main studio, but infinitely more intimate. Vintage equipment lined the walls, old enlargers, developing trays, cameras from decades past. But what captured her attention were the photographs still hanging on a clothesline stretched across the room. Black and white images of the city, of people, of moments frozen in time. "He kept this room exactly as it was when he first opened," Owen explained. "Called it his inspiration space. Said whenever he felt lost, he'd come up here and remember why he started." Rachel moved closer to the photographs, studying the composition, the way light and shadow told stories. These weren't just pictures. They were glimpses into someone's soul. "These are beautiful." He believed that art wasn't about perfection. It was about truth. Owen stood beside her, close enough that she could smell sawdust and something clean, like cedar. Said the best photographs showed people who they could become, not just who they were. Rachel felt something crack open inside her chest. For 5 days, she'd been drowning in Marcus's absence, in the future that would never happen. But standing here, surrounded by evidence of one man's lifelong passion, she felt something shift. Maybe loss didn't have to be an ending. Maybe it could be a beginning. "How long do we have?" she asked quietly. "Before they tear it down?" 3 weeks. Maybe 4 if the permits get delayed. Rachel turned to face Owen, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. "That's not enough time." "No," he agreed. "It's not." But even as they acknowledged the inevitable, Rachel felt something she hadn't experienced since Marcus left. Purpose. This building deserved better than demolition. Her grandfather's legacy deserved better. And maybe, just maybe, she deserved better too than spending the rest of her life mourning what could have been. "Show me everything," Rachel said. "Every corner, every detail. If this place is going down, we're going to make sure people remember what it was." Owen smiled. And for the first time in days, Rachel smiled back. Building something new. The next 2 weeks transformed Rachel's life in ways she never anticipated. What began as a simple documentation project evolved into something deeper, more meaningful. She found herself at the studio every day, sometimes before dawn, capturing the way morning light painted the old wooden floors gold. Owen was always there, carefully dismantling sections of wall to preserve the original craftsmanship, saving pieces of his grandfather's legacy. They fell into an easy rhythm. Rachel would photograph while Owen worked, and during breaks, they'd sit on the dusty floor sharing coffee from a thermos and stories about their lives. She learned that Owen had given up a corporate architecture job to work with his hands, that he'd been engaged once but called it off when he realized he was living someone else's dream. He learned that Rachel had abandoned her artistic aspirations to build a life with Marcus, that she'd spent 3 years making herself smaller to fit into his vision of success. "You're talented," Owen said one afternoon, scrolling through the images on Rachel's camera. "Really talented. Why did you stop doing this professionally?" Rachel shrugged, uncomfortable with the question. Marcus said commercial design was more stable. Better income, better future. Photography felt like a hobby, not a career. "And what do you think?" No one had asked her that in years. Marcus had opinions about everything. Where they should live, what car she should drive, which friends were worth keeping. She'd stopped trusting her own judgment, stopped believing her dreams mattered as much as his. "I think I gave up too easily," she said finally. "I think I let fear make my decisions." Owen set down the camera and looked at her intently. "It's not too late, you know, to choose differently." Before Rachel could respond, her phone buzzed. Marcus, again. He'd been calling constantly since learning about her project from Tessa. She'd been ignoring him, not ready to face whatever he wanted to say. But seeing his name on the screen still made her stomach clench. "You should answer it," Owen said quietly. "Unfinished business has a way of haunting you." That evening, Rachel finally called Marcus back. He answered on the first ring, his voice eager and familiar. "Rachel, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for weeks." "I've been busy," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "Tessa told me about the photography project. That old studio downtown." He paused. "I didn't know you were still interested in that kind of work." "Because you never asked," Rachel thought, but didn't say. "Listen, I made a mistake," Marcus continued, his words rushing out. "New York isn't the same without you. The apartment feels wrong. Everything feels wrong. I want you to come. We can still make this work." 6 weeks ago, this was all Rachel wanted to hear. But now, standing in the studio with sawdust on her jeans and purpose in her heart, his words felt hollow. "What changed?" she asked. "You were very clear that I didn't fit into your plans." "I was scared. The promotion, the pressure, I panicked. But I've had time to think, and I know we belong together. You can do graphic design anywhere. There are plenty of agencies in New York." Rachel felt anger flare in her chest. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about geography. It's about you never seeing me as an equal partner. It's about you making decisions for both of us and expecting me to follow. That's not fair." "It's completely fair, Marcus. You didn't want to build a life with me. You wanted me to fit into the life you'd already designed." Silence stretched between them. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was cold. "So there is someone else. Tessa mentioned you've been spending time with some carpenter." "This has nothing to do with Owen," Rachel said, surprised by how easily his name came to her lips. "This is about me finally realizing I deserve someone who celebrates my dreams instead of dismissing them." She ended the call before he could respond, her hands shaking. Owen had given her space during the conversation, working in the back room, but now he appeared in the doorway. "How did it go?" he asked carefully. "It's done. Really done this time." Rachel felt tears burning her eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were relief and release and the weight of 3 years finally lifting. I spent so long trying to be enough for him that I forgot to be enough for myself. Owen crossed the room and pulled her into a hug. Rachel melted into his embrace, feeling safe and seen in a way she never had with Marcus. When she pulled back, Owen kept his hands on her shoulders. "You're extraordinary, Rachel Monroe. Anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve you." The air between them shifted, charged with something neither had named, but both felt building. Rachel saw her own longing reflected in Owen's eyes, but also hesitation. "Tell me you feel this too," she whispered. "Tell me I'm not imagining it." "I feel it," Owen admitted. "Have felt it since the day you walked in here, drenched and determined. But Rachel, you just got out of a serious relationship. I don't want to be a rebound. I don't want to be the person you run to before you figure out who you are on your own." His honesty hurt. But it was the kind of pain that came from someone caring enough to be truthful. "So what do we do?" "We finish what we started here," Owen said. "We document this place, honor my grandfather's memory. And then we see where we are when the dust settles." Rachel nodded, understanding the wisdom in his words even as her heart protested. They spent the next week working with renewed intensity, as if channeling their unspoken feelings into the project. Rachel's photographs evolved from simple documentation to art, capturing not just the building but the emotion it held, the stories embedded in its walls. On the final day before demolition was scheduled, they stood together in the empty studio, surrounded by boxes of salvaged materials and hard drives full of images. "We did it," Rachel said softly. "We saved what we could." Owen turned to her, his expression serious. "The demolition got delayed. 6 months at least." "Permit issues, legal complications." Rachel's heart leaped. 6 months? The family asked if I had any ideas for the space in the meantime. "And I've been thinking..." He pulled out a rolled set of blueprints. "What if we didn't let them tear it down? What if we gave them a reason to keep it?" Rachel unrolled the plans, her eyes widening as she understood his vision. "A community arts center, studio spaces for rent, a gallery for emerging photographers. Everything his grandfather had loved, reimagined for a new generation. Owen, this is brilliant. But the cost, I have some savings. And you have connections in the design world. If we present them with a viable business plan..." He looked at her hopefully. "Will you partner with me on this?" Rachel thought about Marcus's offer to follow him to New York, to slot into his life. Then she thought about this, building something of her own, with someone who saw her as an equal. "Yes," she said. "Absolutely yes." Opening night 4 months later, Rachel stood in the transformed studio, barely recognizing the space that had once been filled with dust and despair. Exposed brick walls now gleamed under carefully positioned lighting. The old wooden floors had been refinished to a warm honey glow. Gallery walls displayed a rotating exhibition of local photographers, and the back rooms had been converted into rental studios equipped with modern equipment. Owen's grandfather would have been proud. Tonight was the grand opening, and Rachel's stomach churned with anticipation. She adjusted the banner hanging above the entrance. Bennett Arts Collective, where stories come to light. Her own photography exhibition occupied the main gallery, a series titled Resurrection that chronicled the building's transformation from abandonment to rebirth. "Stop fidgeting," Tessa said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. "Everything looks perfect. You look perfect." Rachel smoothed down her emerald dress, the first piece of clothing she'd bought for herself in years without considering what Marcus would think. "What if no one comes? Then Owen will drink all the champagne himself and you'll have the most romantic evening ever." Tessa grinned. "But people will come. Your social media campaign was brilliant. Half the city's art community RSVP'd. As if summoned by her words, the front doors opened and guests began streaming in. Artists, photographers, local business owners, and community members filled the space with chatter and excitement. Rachel watched Owen navigate the crowd, shaking hands and explaining his grandfather's legacy. He caught her eye across the room and smiled, that warm, genuine smile that made her heart skip. They'd been careful over the past months, maintaining professional boundaries while the intensity between them grew impossible to ignore. Working side by side every day, celebrating small victories, supporting each other through setbacks. It had forged something deeper than attraction. Rachel had fallen in love with Owen's kindness, his integrity, the way he listened to her ideas and built upon them rather than dismissing them. Rachel Monroe. A voice cut through her thoughts. She turned to find Marcus standing before her, looking polished and out of place in his expensive suit. I had to see this for myself. Rachel's chest tightened. Marcus, what are you doing here? Your exhibition is getting attention online. People are talking about it in New York. He looked around the space with barely concealed skepticism. I wanted to understand what you chose over our life together. I didn't choose this over you, Rachel said evenly. I chose myself. There's a difference. Marcus moved closer, lowering his voice. We had plans, Rachel. A real future. And you threw it away for what? A renovated warehouse and some small-town art project? Before Rachel could respond, Owen appeared at her side. He didn't touch her, but his presence was grounding, supportive. Everything okay here? Marcus looked between them, his jaw tightening. So it is about him. I knew it. No, Rachel said firmly. It's about me finally having the courage to build a life I actually want. Owen didn't take me away from you, Marcus. You pushed me away the moment you made it clear my dreams didn't matter. Your dreams. Marcus laughed bitterly. You're playing at business with some carpenter in a building that should have been demolished. How is that better than the life we could have had in New York? Rachel felt Owen tense beside her, but she placed a hand on his arm. This was her battle to fight. You want to know the difference? She said, her voice steady and clear. Owen asks my opinion and actually listens to the answer. He celebrates my successes instead of competing with them. He sees my work as art, not as a hobby that needs to be outgrown. That's how it's better, Marcus. I'm building something that's mine, with someone who respects me as an equal partner. Marcus stared at her, and she saw the moment he realized he'd truly lost her. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was waiting so long to leave. Rachel met his eyes without flinching. I wish you well in New York, I really do. But my life is here now. Marcus looked like he wanted to say more, but something in Rachel's expression stopped him. He glanced once more around the gallery, then turned and walked out. Rachel watched him go, feeling nothing but relief. Owen's hand found hers, warm and steady. You okay? I'm better than okay. Rachel squeezed his fingers. I'm free. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and networking. Rachel sold 3 photographs within the first hour and received inquiries about studio rentals. Local press interviewed both her and Owen about their vision for the space. By the time the last guests departed, leaving only scattered champagne glasses and business cards, Rachel was exhausted and exhilarated. She found Owen on the second floor, standing in what had been his grandfather's inspiration room. They'd preserved it exactly as it was, turning it into a small museum honoring the studio's history. Hey, she said softly, joining him by the window. Hiding from your own party? Just taking a moment. Owen turned to her, his eyes reflecting the city lights beyond the window. My grandfather used to say that the best moments in life are the ones that take your breath away. Tonight took my breath away, Rachel. What you've created here, what we've created together. It's more than I ever imagined. Rachel's heart thundered in her chest. Owen, let me finish, he interrupted gently. I've been holding back for months, trying to give you space to heal, to figure out who you are outside of Marcus. But watching you tonight, seeing you stand up to him, seeing you shine, I can't hold back anymore. He cupped her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs brushing her cheeks. I'm in love with you, Rachel Monroe. Not with the idea of you, not with who I want you to be, but with exactly who you are. Your passion, your creativity, your strength. I love that you take 17 photos of the same corner trying to get the light perfect. I love that you cry during Tool commercials. I love every complicated, beautiful part of you. Tears streamed down Rachel's face, but she was smiling. I love you too. I think I have since the day you showed me this room and told me about your grandfather's dreams. You gave me permission to have dreams again, Owen. You helped me remember who I was before I lost myself trying to be what someone else wanted. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Rachel melted into him, feeling pieces of herself that had been scattered finally coming back together. This wasn't a rebound or a distraction from pain. This was real, built on mutual respect and shared vision, and the kind of partnership she'd never known was possible. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and grinning, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "So what happens now?" Rachel looked around the room, at the photographs documenting decades of artistry, at the windows overlooking their transformed studio, at the man who had helped her rebuild not just a building but herself. "Now we keep building," she said, "together." 6 months ago, Rachel had walked into this abandoned building with a broken heart and no idea what came next. She'd been running from pain, from disappointment, from the collapse of everything she thought she wanted. But sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when everything falls apart. Sometimes you have to lose yourself completely before you can discover who you're meant to become. The studio lights glowed warm against the night as Rachel and Owen stood together. Two people who had found each other in the ruins and built something beautiful from the wreckage. Outside, the city hummed with possibility. Inside, surrounded by art and history and hope, they held each other close and looked toward a future neither had planned, but both were ready to create. The Bennett Arts Collective wasn't just a building anymore. It was a testament to second chances, to the courage it takes to start over, and to the transformative power of finding someone who sees you clearly and loves you anyway. Rachel's photographs would hang on these walls, telling stories of decay and renewal. But the most important story, the one about a woman who walked through the doors heartbroken and emerged whole, would live in every corner of this space forever. And as Owen kissed her again beneath his grandfather's carefully preserved photographs, Rachel understood that some endings are really beginnings in disguise. Sometimes the storm that destroys your plans is actually clearing the path for something infinitely better. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The end.